Hi folks, here we are again. It's been a little while. I have been rather busy, so apologies for that. In fact, too busy, if it's possible. Anyway, the reason for this little video, which will be short and sweet, is because there's been a lot of adverse publicity recently about the Carp Society, which I was a member of some years ago, and for quite some time. There's been, as I say, it's sort of dubious leadership is the big question mark, and whether they're selling Horseshoe Lake or not, or if it's being done on the sly and all this kind of propaganda or speculation that's going on. It kind of brought to mind that over the years I've also been questioned by anglers on the bank and other places, of course, about the BCSG. What's the point of it? What's the benefits of being a member? And of course questioned whether the BCSG was ethical or elitist, or all kinds of spurious questions. So I thought that I'd try and put the record straight as best I can. As you've seen from my membership card, the green one, the early days one, that was 1973, that was stamped on, and I actually joined in 72, but I couldn't find my 72 membership card, so they had to give me another one. And so it's gone on with the other membership cards. So I'm sort of quite well qualified to talk about the BCSG. Some people have actually questioned whether I've ever been a member of the BCSG for some really weird reason, best known to themselves. Even in the early days, all you got to do is look at the old Carp magazines that the BCSG have produced over the years. And in the early days, certainly during the 70s, members' names, addresses and telephone numbers were published in the magazines. So it's a bit difficult to say that I was never a member when my name appears on the membership list in those old magazines. So there you go, people are weird, aren't they? So yeah, the BCSG, recently, or a couple of years ago, I had a long conversation with Terry Hearn. I know Terry quite well, and I asked him, I said, obviously he's well qualified to become a member of the BCSG, and why didn't he? And he said, well, as he saw it, there was nothing in it for him. And of course it was also like somebody had suggested that he joined and got him forms and all this, and they wanted all the details of his catches, how long have you been carp fishing and how big's your biggest carp and all this kind of, and you're asking Terry Hearn these questions. Yeah, I could see Terry's point why he wasn't particularly interested. Back in the day, just to sort of try and set the history record straight, the BCSG never came across to me, and certainly a lot of my friends and fellow members never came across as elitist. Carp fishermen were very thin on the ground. There was probably like 200 in the United Kingdom instead of 200 in one town that there is nowadays. And it was actually quite good to meet up with other anglers on the bank who were carp fishermen. Obviously you didn't want to sort of go telling them what you were doing and whatever. Things were played a bit close to the chest. But at the same time it was good to share with other carp fishermen, and subsequently become fishing mates, and fish lakes together and campaigns and all this kind of stuff. And it was always like that, certainly for the first 10 years or more, as I recall. And the beauty, of course, in the old days, the 70s, that all the what are now referred to as the greats and the legends of carp fishing were there. I remember going to meetings in Staines or somewhere over that way anyway. That was a national meeting, it wasn't a regional meeting. And there were the likes of Dick Walker, Chris Yates, Kevin Clifford, Chris Ball, Roy Johnson, Bruce Ashby, Len Arbery. The list goes on and on and on. And these people were my peers. I didn't look up to them as gods, I just looked up to them as they were just other carp fishermen, and pretty successful carp fishermen at that. Name I missed there, which I shouldn't have done, of course, is Hutchie. Hutchie was there. And we used to have all sorts of kind of wonderful, colourful conversations and debates about trying to catch fish and baits and hooks and line and all that kind of thing. And it was just great to be mixing with those people and sharing thoughts and experiences, and that's how it developed. And always, like for certainly 20 years, the BCSG was all about gentlemen. Okay, sure, we had the BCSG badge to wear, not that really mattered, but it was, when you met another guy and you exchanged names, Chris Ford, blah blah blah, and it was, oh, you're a BCSG member, aren't you? I recognise your name, and so you would automatically, there was a common thing there, that you could talk sort of openly and freely to each other, where you wouldn't sort of disclose things perhaps to somebody who didn't have much of a clue. I mean, I've always liked, during my fishing career when I've been on the bank, I've always liked to try and show people little tips and tricks and approaches to try and improve their fishing, to improve their catches, whether it's tying a knot or whether it's a specific hook or whatever, and also the approach to fishing. I mean, going way back into ancient history, the first words written about carp, Isaac Walton, study to be quiet, and that's never been truer. You stand a better chance of catching carp if you're quiet and stealthy on the bank. Above all rig techniques and tricks and tips and bait and whatever, just be quiet and just watch, and you'll catch more fish. But that's another story altogether. I've wandered. Sadly though, despite the huge investment by the Carp BCSG hierarchy in this book, I've had it for over a year. It makes a good doorstop, but I've not yet found any mention in there of camouflage and stealth, and yet it claims to be, the answer to all things carpy. This again brings us back onto the BCSG then and now. This is the 7th BCSG book. The current steering committee and whatever decided to risk tens of thousands of pounds of BCSG members' money on producing this book. Now, fortunately, it has ended up making a profit, but it could have been an absolute disaster financially, because it was done on such a huge, grand scale. And the reason that it's been done on that grand scale is because of egos. Back in the day, the original BCSG books, if you look at them, there's like less than 100 pages, but they're all contributed by members of the BCSG, which is what you'd expect, I suppose. But this time, it was put together, on the egos of the people that are running the BCSG at the moment, which is why it's ended up being such a monstrous edition. I'm not saying whether it's good or bad, apart from the omission about stealth and quiet and torchlights and that kind of stuff. The contributors, who are all BCSG members, have done so in all good faith, and there's a lot of good stuff in there, no doubt about that. But my point is, it's coming to the management side. Now, back in the day, Peter Mohan, as everybody knows, was the founder of the BCSG, and again, the committee always did what it had to do. There was no element of, I want to do this or I want to do that. It was all about we. It was that shared ethos and the gentlemanly thing between members, and that's the way it was. And as I say, getting back to Terry Hearn and why Terry's not joined, as he said, there's nothing there for him. The people that are in the BCSG, especially the well-known ones, of course, people he already knows or already doesn't want to know because of who they are. And I think that's sad. I mean, as I mentioned, back in the day we had people who were recognised as legends. Jack Hilton and Tom Mintram come to mind. as others that I missed out originally. And these people were there because they wanted to be there and mix in with other carp anglers and talking about stuff. Whereas nowadays there are none of those, Hutchinson, Yates, Hiltons. There's none of those coming through. There's plenty of wannabes. I'm famous because I'm something to do with the BCSG, and I want to become a legend. But there's lots of people out there who are far better anglers who aren't members of the BCSG and never will be and don't want to be. There's a long list of famous names, well-known anglers over the past 5-10 years, or more recently, who aren't interested in joining the BCSG because of the way it is. Because nowadays it has become elitist, it has become all about me and what a big I am. That's the sad truth about it. I mean, there's been changes in policy, and yet the steering committee, for instance, at last year's 2014's AGM, they brought through various statutes, because the BCSG had never had any kind of regulatory impositions on it before. It was all done, as I say, gentlemanly. But they felt they had to bring in a constitution, or elements of a constitution, to bring in control. And yet, having done that at the AGM, they immediately ignored one of those statutes that they brought in, which is, no great surprise, really. And that's it. So the question is the BCSG worth joining? In all honesty, I think probably not. There's a lot of really good anglers in the BCSG, really good anglers, people who really know their stuff, people that you'll never hear of, because they just get on and they do it, they fish. It's the same people may not even contribute to the BCSG magazines, because all they're interested in is fishing. They don't want to write articles about it, they don't want to become famous and well known. That's not what they're into carp fishing for. But as I say, sadly, it seems that a lot of the people at the top are there more to become famous for whatever rewards that might bring, whether it's just a swollen head or a swollen bank balance, I don't know. But that's the sad state of things. Now, I would conclude that any members of the BCSG who watch this, it is seriously in your best interest to go to this year's AGM, which is coming up this weekend, the end of June, as always. You need to attend the AGMs, because there's all kinds of stuff that comes to light at the AGMs which you will never hear about, and the only way you'll hear about it is by being there, because the really brief, like schoolboy version of the AGM, the minutes of the AGM, doesn't contain a fraction of what's actually discussed and goes forward. And that the BCSG is going downhill when the front cover of the magazine's got somebody rather appropriately dressed in a wife-beater vest holding a double-figure carp. You know that the BCSG is going downhill when you see that on the cover. So you need to be there, guys. The real hardcore grassroots BCSG members. On the note of which, for aspiring BCSG members, you need to know that they don't want you, and it's all about money. The BCSG currently has about 420 members, give or take, and the committee stated at last year's AGM they do not want any more members. They cannot afford to have any more members. So it doesn't matter how good a carp fisherman you are, even if you are Terry Hearn or Frank Warwick or anybody else, they don't want you in there, because one, you'll take the limelight away from them, and secondly, because the BCSG has now become more about finances and about what can be afforded and what can't be afforded. But on the same note, international members, which have always been welcome in the BCSG, back in the day we had quite a few fellas from Holland in particular who became members, and I believe still are, or were until recently. And these members again were encouraged because it was interesting to hear what was happening in Germany and Holland and Belgium or whatever. But again, now at last year's AGM, the committee made it very clear that international members aren't welcome because they can't afford to have international members. If you join as an international member, they have to send you a magazine. Because you're a member, you're entitled to it, but it costs too much because it has to go on by international. So they're not interested in international members. Again, it doesn't matter how good you are or where you live in the world. They're proud to declare world domination with this last book. Oh yeah, it's sold all around the world. Yeah, big deal. You know, total world domination. You know, Sieg Heil. But you know, they don't want foreign members. That's a fact. You know, so just bear this in mind. This is the group as it is today, as it was never intended to be. And current BCSG members need to be aware of this and get their bums along to the AGM. One other thing, you may and probably aren't aware that at last year's AGM I actually presented an award, and the whole purpose of this award was for it to be given to a member of the group, or members if necessary, to be shared collectively, for members who did something that was either unselfish or un-PC rather than being PC, but did so for the right reasons. And I'll insert a picture here because obviously I don't have it anymore, of the golden balls of honour. And as I say, they're to be presented to a member for instance, returning a fish, maybe a whacker, that was like in poor health. So rather than sack it or mess about with weighing it and just slipped it back because it was in the fish's best interest. That's just one example. But that, you know, as I say, something that was either unselfish or un-PC. They did what was right rather than what was supposedly right. So that's it. That's the BCSG. I gave that award last year. In giving it to the group, I actually awarded it to the steering committee so that they did at least have one pair of balls between them, because it seemed that they were struggling. They needed help. So I gave them a pair of balls, and it's hopefully this year will be awarded to somebody who's perhaps a bit more worthy. On the subject of the steering committee, it was interesting to note that despite my questioning about something that had occurred on the forum, a committee member threatening and abusing, I wanted to know why that committee member didn't get the same treatment as anybody else would. And the chairman again reiterated that he'd spoken on the phone for 3 hours explaining why an apology was due or was worthy of being given. Excuse me. But he was too afraid to ask for the apology, so the official got away with the behaviour that he was exhibiting, which was totally ungentlemanly and totally un-BCSG like. But hey, that's the BCSG today. So if you want to join it, or you want to try and join it, do so, because there are some great people there to meet. If you're already a member and you're happy where you are, do it. Just keep doing it. But be aware that behind closed doors, because there's only one AGM but there's lots of other meetings that go on, behind closed doors there's other things that are happening which could affect the finances of the BCSG. So just be aware. So whatever, be lucky people, catch some fish, and with any luck I'll see you on the bank somewhere sometime in the future. Take care.